Hello, everybody. We are back for Techlore Talks 13. I'm Henry, and then this is, what's your name
I'm
again?
Jonah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
been a long time since the last one.
yes, it has. I think it's still shorter than the gap between 11 and 12, though. So I think,
Maybe. So
maybe.
we're making
We
progress.
are making progress. The Google event. Well, why don't we just dive right into the main thing? So, 7 years of security updates. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah,
Do you want to talk about
very
that?
cool. I mean, that's the definitely the one of the it's the longest out there, like guarantees, I think.
What's Apple's
Fairphone matches
formal
it.
guarantee?
Apple Apple has a confusing policy. They haven't like officially stated, but they have like two lists of devices. They have obsolete and vintage devices, and um, I forget which one is which. I think vintage is devices that are between 5 and 7, where they don't like really guarantee. And then obsolete is devices that are older than 7 years, and then they officially say we're not ever supporting this
But they
at
still
all. So
push updates sometimes, just because they can.
yeah, rarely. It depends on yeah, but you don't see it a lot. Besides for like that GPS bug that would break the device or something like that.
Right.
They don't get security updates after 7 years, typically, things like
Well,
that.
well, 7 years is super cool. Like the fact that Google did that, and it kind of sucks because, well, it's good for Google, but when it was 5 years, I could justify maybe buying a non-Google phone that has 4 years of updates. But if Google's promising seven, there's no way I'm considering any other Android device. Not like I would have anyway, because I think it is only the Zenfone that interests me outside of the Pixel lineup.
Sure.
But with the 7 years of updates, it's a no-brainer to go with that.
Now that Google is like committed to 7 years, it'd be cool if like Samsung and maybe even Apple like followed suit.
It would be cool.
If it sets like an industry's trend, that's probably the best thing. Do you think that 7 years seems realistic for Google to keep around a product? There aren't a lot of Google products that last 7 years.
Maybe that's their plan. They're like, in 5 years, we're just going to discontinue the Pixel lineup anyway, so who cares?
Right,
But
right. I mean, we're only on the Pixel 8, which is pretty
that's pretty good for
impressive, but
Google.
that's only
I think the Pixels are
8
safe.
years.
Honestly,
Yeah.
like I think Google's committed to keeping the Pixel lineup. And if anything, I would actually argue that 7 years is them like doubling down on the Pixel lineup because it's only been increasing. You know, they went from 3 to 5 to now 7. And so that is super good. I think it's promising and it's good news for the Pixel lineup. I'm excited to see it. And I know some people were upset about the price increase for the Pixels. But
Yep.
all phones are getting more expensive. Not to like justify why phones are getting more expensive. Like I'm not happy about it myself, but to give context, all phones are getting more expensive. I don't think it's unique to Google. And also you're getting 2 extra years of possible life out of the phone. And so assuming you're someone who keeps your phone for a long period of time, you could actually keep your phone and the value per month would get dramatically better if you kept it for an extra 2 years. So I think it's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to see the 8A if there is one. Do you think there's going to be an 8A? Because it's definitely going to carry over the 7 years.
I'm sure there's going to be an 8A eventually. When do they release them? Typically in the spring, I think.
Yeah, I did.
I think it's similar to the Apple's iPhone SE situation, if I remember correctly.
Well, were there any other big announcements? Android 14 was kind of lackluster, I felt, in the privacy and security space. So I wasn't too impressed by it. Were there any features, at least, in Android 14 that were cool?
I honestly didn't see any Android 14 specific features that were significant. I didn't look at the announcement that much, I guess. I was just looking at Pixel exclusive features. So I'd have to check that out.
Right. I did see at least Calyx already made an announcement about Android 14 support. So we're already starting to see some custom ROMs start to adopt Android 14, which is pretty cool. So
That's cool. Minor improvements every year is what we're seeing now. Not a lot of change. There was something. Oh, I was going to ask you. I think since our last episode, you went on that trip. Do you want to talk about
oh
what you were doing?
yeah, so I went to the Nextcloud Hub conference. It was very fun. Lots of cool people there. And I pretty much just got to record. I didn't have to speak, so I just got to experience recording it. I'm putting the video together, and it should be done soon. I'm kind of waiting for them. I don't know if they're done yet, but they should hopefully have their videos of all the speakers done. I've been waiting for them to upload the videos of all their speakers so I can direct people. to the Nextcloud talks after my video goes live. So it's not just me talking about it and then there's nothing to direct them to. So, but it was a really fun trip. I
Did you
loved
see
Berlin. Yeah.
Were there any good talks, interesting ones that you liked specifically?
Yeah, I liked actually. There was one about the greenhouse emissions and kind of the environmental impact of pretty much the global internet, and different things that people can do in order to alleviate some of that issue. But also just like the announcements were probably the best part. Like if you're interested in Nextcloud, you get to hear all the announcements, and some of these people are like really into Nextcloud. So like they were like
I'd
very
imagine,
excited.
yeah.
Like, you know, when you go to like the Apple like WWDC, people are just like, yeah. It's like the same thing, but for the Nextcloud community, which was really cool to watch. Like they're just like, now this button was moved here, and they're like, yeah. Definitely a passionate community. Good people too. Punkt released a Pigeon update that allows you to
Yep.
sync multiple devices, so I need to check that out because that sounds super rad. The only issue then would be, we already went through this, but the only issue then would be you wouldn't be able to use Signal on another mobile device. So like the Punkt has to be your core mobile device, and you can only link devices from
Right.
there. So what I need to test, actually, I need to test if you can link Molly to the Punkt, so then you could have the Punkt and Molly and make like the Molly phone. Because so for people who don't know, Molly's a fork of Signal. Normally you can't have Signal on two Signal phones. Like on two phones, you can't have Signal on two of them. You have to only use linked devices on one Signal device. But with Molly, you can use Molly as a linked device. So you could actually have Signal on the Punkt and on an Android device. So I did test that, and it works with the iPhone and the Android device. So I could have Signal on the iPhone and then use Molly as the linked device. And that's really nice because you sent me an Apple Watch, and I've been experimenting a full-on like Apple Watch workflow. It's so cool, dude. Like I've never used an Apple
Is
Watch
it?
before, and it's a cool
They are
device.
nice.
Like they did a
Absolutely.
really good job on the attention to detail. Everything works like just like how you'd like it to work. It's a shitty running watch, but like it's good at everything else. And it's been super cool because now I just go out and I just bring my watch with me, and then I get Signal notifications. I can respond to Signal notifications, and it's like better than what the Punkt would be, I think, from a minimalist perspective. It's really cool. Have you been testing
That's
out
cool.
Signal notifications on an Apple Watch?
I've been getting them, but I always have my phone with me, I think, so it's easier to just, I like to type to respond.
Got it. Yeah, typing does suck.
But it's been useful for just like notifying me.
Right.
I don't have to grab my phone all the time, but
Right.
the replies aren't great. It would be super nice if Pigeon would steal that feature from Molly,
It's true.
so that you could use it as a link
So
device,
that the
because that
Punkt-
would be much preferable to me.
Yeah.
Could be a link device instead of the primary device.
Right. The option would be good. Actually, that's what Molly does. Molly has an option. You
Yeah.
can register it
Right.
as your device, or you can make it a link device. So if Punkt did that, I mean, Punkt is literally just the Android Signal app.
Or Signal should just let you do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they let you do it with the iPad app, so I don't know why they don't just port that to
Yeah.
all of their apps. Signal is ridiculous to me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, at this point, was it you who mentioned that the Signal, that Meredith said that it would be released early 2023 username support?
Yeah. Usernames. They're still not here.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're waiting for.
I don't know, man. It's sad because it's getting to the point. Like, they are rolling out some cool features. They finally released message edits, so that's cool. I'll take that as a
Yep.
win. But yeah, lack of usernames is really an issue. And now that I have an Apple Watch I'm testing out, I'm also like, the lack of an Apple Watch Signal app is really whack. And also, what was the other issue? Oh yeah, no linked devices. The whole like multi-device issue would just not be an issue if they just rolled out the option for any device to be a linked device.
Yeah.
So I don't
That'd
know.
be super nice.
It's a bummer.
A lot of reasons I can't use Signal for like my primary messenger, but
I've just dealt with
Whatever.
the limitations because it is my primary messenger. So like I've had to migrate and adopt. It sucks because you literally have to adopt what devices you buy to the Signal limitations. Like that's how bad it is. Any other messengers you've been testing out?
not really. I've been using Element more again And every time I use it, it gets better. I know you haven't used it in a while, but
Yeah, I try not to.
not to call you
Um,
out or anything.
I did hear there's Element X now. I don't know. Have you tested that?
Yeah.
How is it?
It it right now it's not working on my phone, so I haven't used it recently. It is supposed to be a lot faster at syncing, which is why I wanted to try it out because I'm having a lot of I think it's just internet problems lately where things just take forever to download. I don't know what's going on with my ISP, the Tailscale thing with Mullvad.
Have you tested
But
out?
I haven't used it though. I still haven't tested
Oh,
it
you should
out.
test it out.
So
It's pretty cool. So,
yeah.
for people curious, Tailscale is a way to essentially, it's a VPN. It essentially allows you to connect to like your local network if you want. Like for example, for me, I use it to connect to my NAS on the go. So I can just use Tailscale. I connect to Tailscale. It uses WireGuard, and then I can just connect to my NAS from anywhere. It's great. But using it alongside a VPN like worked fine for some VPNs. Like it worked well with iVPN, so I could run iVPN and Tailscale at the same time. But sometimes it was kind of a pain in the ass. Like sometimes I noticed that if I connected to Tailscale first, I couldn't, which I forgot the order. I could only connect in a certain order. Like I forgot what the order was, but
What are you doing?
what was that? What the hell was that? I didn't touch anything. My hands aren't. What was that? Was that an Apple thing?
That that looked like the Apple thing. Like you know when you send a text message as an iMessage. I don't know if you have ever done this, but if you hold down the send button, you can send them with effects.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a balloons effect that looked exactly like that. But I don't know
Dude.
what.
What the hell was
going
that?
on.
Okay. Well, for people listening on the podcast, there's just balloons that came up while I was talking in the video for no good reason. I don't know what that was. But pretty much it was kind of a pain in the butt. So pretty much like you would have to connect in a certain order in order for things to work properly. But now it's all done via Tailscale. So you just log into Tailscale in your admin portal and you can pretty much just create a Mullvad slot or whatever, and then you just set it as your exit node. And so now you just connect to Tailscale, and then you'll always tunnel out through Mullvad. And so now it's just one VPN connection, one VPN client, and everything just works smoothly. And at first, I thought it was pretty ridiculous because the integration was really bad. So if you went to the exit node selection tool, it just gave you every Mullvad server, and the naming scheme, I'm looking at it, is like jp-tyo-wg-002.mullvad.ts.net. What that means is Japan, Tokyo, WireGuard, Server 2. They didn't even bother to like label them. They just gave you like the server names, and that's how you have to. So you have to like use the scroll wheel to like find the U.S. servers or whatever country you're connecting to or from. But they recently updated that, so now you can just connect to a country and connect to like the fastest server in a country, and they actually just give you the country name. They don't give you the freaking server ID or the server URL, whatever. So it's really good now. I highly recommend for people who are using Tailscale. I did like this one post on our forum. A user named Ethics made a post called "Privacy is not about only using private software." And they're pretty much talking about how it's not just about like changing your browser or changing your messenger or installing a custom ROM. They are pretty much saying you can even use Facebook, but you must know how it uses your data. Then you can go ahead with caution. Privacy is all about knowledge. And I personally like that. I think it's not everything, but I think that there's a very strong argument to be made that like you can use an unprivate service, for example, as long as you're aware of how it's unprivate and how it's impacting you, and if you're okay with those limitations. And that's what like understanding privacy is all about, I think. So I really like that post.
Yeah, I that's a good point to keep in mind. Like that privacy is going to be different for everyone, and I feel like we talk about that a lot. I'll tell you what's been annoying me about like a lot of privacy channels, and I think that we do this too quite a bit, but it just recently like it's been bothering me that like all of these privacy channels and websites and people out there are like super focused on this libertarian version of privacy where like the individual user has to focus on improving their privacy as much as possible. And there's really not a lot of focus on like getting governments to regulate privacy and that kind of
Right.
thing, and making like societal change and like getting these companies to respect privacy instead of like teaching people how to defend themselves. Like, you know, it's important to have both. Like if we live in this society currently, we have to, people need to know like what's going on and like what they can do about it. But also like, it seems to be that's the main focus for everybody. And it's not like, it's just not good marketing, like for privacy in general.
Right. Like
if
you're screwed
telling
unless
everybody,
kind of marketing.
pretty much. Yeah, it makes everybody paranoid. It makes people who are interested in privacy like out to be crazy.
Well, what would you say to someone who's listening and they're thinking, okay, maybe if the government stepped in, we might see some improvements, but I don't believe in government regulation over something like this. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's just tricky. Like, I guess it depends on what their belief in what the government should be doing is.
Right.
Like, if they don't believe in any sort of, like, government inner or regulation in, like, the free market at all, then I don't know if...
There's nothing to say.
I don't know what I could say about that because, you know, you can't rely on, like, the capitalistic free market alone to self-regulate itself. We just know that to be a fact, but...
It's not a fact to some people. But when
This is a hot take now. Hot take corner.
Right. I would say on personally on my end, one thing I really like to think about is the reason why you can go to a grocery store. Now, you might still, become overweight or obese because the health of the food isn't guaranteed. But you can go to a store and be pretty certain you're not going to get poisoned. And the reason for that is because there are regulations around food. There's certain things that can be in your food. There's certain things that cannot be in your food. And there's a lot of protocols that go into place to make sure that the food you're buying is generally safe. You're going to get some outbreaks of some things here and there, but I'd say like overall, we've done a solid job. The fact that you can just step into any grocery store for the most part and just walk out knowing that the food's probably safe is really impressive. But we don't have anything like that with like the internet side of things. Like you can sign up for any website, they can kind of do whatever they want with your data. So I think that people are really, personally, I think that the way people see this is, they don't want the government to be stepping in and stifling companies or stifling your rights, XYZ. But I actually see this as giving you more rights because this pretty much, like we see things like the California Privacy Act, which give me more rights. I can email a company and ask them to send me all the data they have about me. And that's a legal right that I have. If they don't do it, they're breaking the law. I can also legally request them to delete my data. That's part of like the rights that I've been given. And it's universal for every company. So like, I think there's a big misconception behind what government regulation has to look like, because this is pretty much allowing companies to offer people a better private and secure experience that keeps people safer and gives them more rights. The individual gets more rights because of this.
Do you know they had Google Pay and then they named it Android Pay and then they named it Google Pay again and then they named it Google Wallet and now I think it's Google Pay or maybe Android Pay. I don't know. I think they have both a Google Wallet and a Google Pay app at the moment.
Oh my, dude, that's so funny.
It's a problem for them though.
It is.
I think I don't remember if I was watching Marquez or Linus a video that they made about it, but they were like, you don't have to worry about this with Apple because like the Apple Podcast app is not just going to go away. If you buy an iPhone, you're going to have the Apple Podcast app forever. You don't have to worry about it. Whereas like they just killed Google Podcast. Did you know that?
Yeah, I got an email about it.
Yeah, crazy.
Because we had podcast on there.
And they have, yeah, that's true.
And they emailed and
I guess they're on YouTube Music now? Maybe?
Yeah, they converted Google Podcast to just YouTube Music because YouTube Music now has a podcast thing, which we already did. So all our podcasts are in a playlist. We can set it as a like a formal podcast on YouTube, which is classified differently somehow. I mean, it makes sense. But that's what they should have done in the first place. Like they always had YouTube.
Right.
It should have always just been on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
I don't know what's up with that. They can't decide.
You know what it is? They're just not a bold company. because they get an idea, but they don't want to go all in because they're scared that if they go all in, it's not going to work out. And so they make like a half-baked decision. They're like, okay, we might like roll out a new messenger, but we don't want to discontinue the last one because maybe the new one won't work out. And then like before you know it, like they make all these half-baked decisions, and then they sometimes end up making what they should have said and done in the first place. Like in the case of YouTube Music, I think that's what they should have done in the first place. Like they already had YouTube Music. They had YouTube. The podcasts are already cross-posted to YouTube anyway, because there's like no like major podcaster who doesn't cross-post their stuff to YouTube. So it makes sense to just like bake it into YouTube. But they probably didn't want to do that because it sounded too intimidating. Apple just does whatever they want.
Yeah, and it's. I think they just talked to each other. Like all the people in Apple's different departments, they coordinate.
Yeah, they actually coordinate.
things.
It's
Right.
It's not like just two people.
I don't think, like Google has not. I really don't think Google has made any like sensible product decisions since canceling Google Plus. I think like after that point in their history, everything has just gone terribly.
Did you ever use Google Plus?
Yeah,
How was it?
I actually did. It was good. But I think Google Plus was the last thing that they went like all in on. Like that was a really bold decision of them to make, and it didn't work out. And I think since then they haven't been able to make another decision like that as a company.
But why didn't?
Because literally everything do you remember for a while every single thing was like Google Plus connected.
Right.
Like they made people add their names to their YouTube profile because it was connected to Google Plus. They made people switch to Hangouts from Google Talk because that was the new messenger that was on Google Plus, that kind of thing. Every single Google service was like connected to Google Plus, and I heard like internally all of the product managers got like big bonuses if they connected their product to Google Plus. So it was like a big thing at Google. And that was like the last big thing at Google. I think everything has just been separate ever since. But yeah, Google as a company, not super impressive with their product management.
No, it's unfortunate because like they do have some really good products, and it would be awesome to have a little bit more faith in how they, I guess, connected things. I mean, so like I told you, I've never used an Apple Watch before in my life, and I'm like for the first time ever just trying one out to see what it's like. And it's mind-blowing. Like, you have to understand the perspective I'm coming from. The perspective I'm coming from is I've never used an Apple Watch before. I know literally nothing about it outside of, like, its running capabilities, because that's all I've ever used a watch for in the past. It's just, like, so how is it for running? That's all I care about. And so to get the watch out, I'm realizing, oh, wow, like, when they released focus modes, that was, like, everything connected like on all their devices. Like the focus modes was exactly how Apple wanted to like roll everything out for all their devices for decades to come, and they nailed it because now they can release any device and it will integrate properly with focus modes. Google could never do something like that. Something so simple. Like on iOS, it's so simple. Like if I go for a run, it automatically converts to like a fitness focus mode, so I don't get notified by anybody while I'm running. And that applies to all my devices, and that's a feature that's already baked into the watch. I mean, it seems simple for people who've used an Apple Watch for their whole life, which is a lot of people. But, like,
Yeah.
it's the little things like that that, like, you can just tell were done properly from the ground up. So you just don't see
It's
that.
incredibly appealing. I have a friend who texted me just last week, and he was like, I'm thinking about switching to iPhone. And I texted him back jokingly, like, oh, was the Pixel 8 not convincing enough for you? And he said that he actually watched the keynote, and he was looking for the Pixel 8 because apparently he has a Pixel 7 Pro now, but he wanted to see like what the Pixel Watch 2 was going to be like, and nothing was super impressive about it. And the reason that he's switching is because he wants like a smartwatch, and none of the Android options are good at all, and Apple and Google is not like working on that kind of thing. So like being able to have an Apple Watch and have it like seamlessly integrate with the rest of his devices is like super important. Like that's important to like a lot of people who just want like all of their stuff to work. I think.
Right. Like the integration is
Google
next level.
Google can't do any of that. So it's like a big problem like outside of just the techie space. But like I think nobody trusts Google
Right.
to handle any of their products at all. It's like a well-known thing.
Yeah, I don't think people could articulate it. I think if I was to ask my friends, like, oh, why aren't you all in on Google products? They wouldn't be
Right.
able to articulate, oh, because Google is an inconsistent company and they release half-baked products. What they probably have done is they've just tried using them, and they were like, I don't like this better than this, but they don't know why. They probably just think that, like, oh, this is better. Like, I had an easier time using this, or this was more convenient, or hey, like, this just did things for me. So I think that's probably where most people come at it from. But like, if you're trying to analyze
Yeah.
like the engineering and the technical details of how they implement things, like, that's exactly what's going on. It's like Google has this messy ecosystem. I mean, Android by itself without the smartwatch is already just incredibly messy. That's just the nature of the situation, like,
Yeah.
it's less consistent. There's a lot more work that has to go into like making things cohesive on Android. How developers integrate with the operating system is a lot messier than how iOS does things. How it integrates with other devices and tablets and desktops is also messier. Like, nothing is an ecosystem.
Have you ever used Samsung's products like firsthand?
Outside of like seeing what people use and like just quickly like using other people's phones. Like, I've used people's Samsung phones for like brief periods, but I've never owned a Samsung phone because I hated all my time using other people's Samsung devices. But does
Yeah.
Samsung have a decent ecosystem?
Uh, I don't know. I've just been reading a lot of like comments and like people's reactions recently in like the Android community from the Google keynote Pixel 8 stuff, and a lot of people are like, well, it seems like the general consensus among like non-tech people is that Android is Samsung and not Google and not anyone else actually. Like that's the big thing. And if you look at like market share, it makes a lot of sense because most people I'd have to look at like Pixel versus Samsung market share, but I think all of these other Android manufacturers have gone out of business. There's no LG, there's no HTC. Samsung's the only one left. They're doing something different from everybody else. Like Google, Motorola, Asus, they're all pretty much stock Android, and Samsung has their own special stuff. But it seems like Samsung is really like when people think of Android, that's what most people think of, and they also have like they do have an ecosystem of devices, from phones to tablets to laptops. And I don't know, I really don't like Samsung personally, but apparently a lot of people absolutely do, and it might be a good experience if you're like totally dedicated to that ecosystem. I'm not sure.
I'd have to try it out, but I don't want to get multiple Samsung devices.
Right, it's hard.
Right. I don't know if anyone uses Samsung and is in the Samsung ecosystem. Definitely leave your thoughts below, especially if you have experience with the Apple ecosystem, to give us a better idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S. at least, Apple's 52%, Samsung's 28%, and then no other single manufacturer is more than 10%. Motorola is 9%, and Google is 2% of the market.
Wow.
So, if like the vast majority is like Samsung of Android devices are Samsung devices in the U.S. at least.
That's weird because I rarely see anyone with a Samsung device, like with my own two eyes. If I'm going around, like, I just don't see people with Samsung
Really?
phones. I feel like I see more Pixels than Samsung phones, but maybe I look more for the Pixels. Like, I can
That
spot a
could be
Pixel.
it. I see you can spot a Pixel a mile away.
Yeah.
with their crazy design. I do definitely notice a lot of Pixels, and I think it's mostly because of that. But almost every single person I know has iPhones or like see around.
Oh,
the city.
definitely
I
iPhones.
almost never see Android phones at all.
That's what I'm saying.
So,
Like, I just see iPhones and Pixels. So I just
Yeah.
assumed that those were like the two main options, but I would never have guessed that Samsung has like 14 times the percentage of market share.
Yeah.
Dude, I am so bummed that they didn't release a 15 mini. I mean, I didn't expect a 15 mini,
Yeah.
but like, I was bummed. And now my only hope is the SE being the mini variant. But honestly, I really think that they're going to go for the XDR.
Really,
Yeah.
the XR, the 10R. You don't say X.
Sorry, I don't.
If you're an Apple branding person.
Right, I don't really keep up with the lingo, but yeah, like what is it, the XR?
Yeah,
Yeah.
10R. Obviously.
10R. Okay.
You pronounce it 10.
Yeah,
Not
so
X.
the iPhone XR, I think they're going to reuse that, not the mini, which is
that
really
is-
sad.
The 10R11 design is easily my least favorite iPhone
Oh,
design.
me too.
I think of all time.
Yeah, me too.
So-
I agree. There isn't any other design I can think of that's worse. Maybe like the 3G. I wasn't a fan of the iPhone 3G, 3GS. That was a pretty bad
Maybe.
time, I think.
Was it?
Yeah. Have you seen it?
I don't know if I don't think I've ever seen an iPhone in person before the 4.
Oh, I had to repair a 3G,
So-
3GS once. And so I got like hands-on with it, and it was like really nasty.
That
stuff.
black plastic bag. Is that what you're
Yeah.
thinking of?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't hate it.
It's not great though. It's a curved version of the iPhone 4, and I'm not a big fan of the rounded corners. Like it looks like a pebble.
Yeah, it does look like a pebble. That is a good description of it.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan. I think the white looks nicer than the black, but I'm still not a huge fan. I think the iPhone 4 looks leagues better than this. Like the iPhone 4 was a pretty cool phone, design-wise, as well as the 5 and the 5S.
The 5S, I think, was like peak design. I did like the 4S a lot when it came out, but like that 30-pin connector was stupid.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of the 5S too. 5S was a very underrated phone. I mean, first 64-bit processor, and then obviously you have the really nice design. That's when they first released Space Gray too, I think. And it was just a really great phone. The 5S lasted forever too. I think it was because it was their first 64-bit phone, and they were kept supporting 64-bit for a long time.
I was actually like so hyped when they brought the original SE out and it was the 5S design, because that was like my favorite iPhone design up to that point. Even like the 10 was okay, but like the 6 through 8, I wasn't a fan.
Me neither. You
I
know
like
what?
the flat edges.
I'm gonna say I actually might like the 10 and 11 better than like the iPhone 6. I was not a fan of the iPhone 6. That is actually one of my least. Yeah, I'm looking at the iPhone 6 right now. I really don't like the iPhone 6.
Yeah, the iPhone 6 was bad.
It was also the first like big iPhone, so I'm very biased against it.
Yeah, that could be it. But it was just a bad phone too.
Right.
It had the antenna lines that went across it. They bent.
Yeah.
The 6 Plus did.
Yeah. Ben Gate.
You know what my first iOS device was? It was the iPod Touch 4.
Oh, interesting. My first was the iPhone 4.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't get a phone for a long time. Because I couldn't afford the monthly plan.
That's fair.
So the iPod Touch 4 though was actually it looked nice, but
So
it
the one
only
that
looked nice
scratched?
very briefly, because it had that polished steel back.
It scratched.
It got so scratched. It got incredibly scratched. It was the craziest looking device I've ever seen.
Right. I remember the 4 and just how like crazy thin it was.
Yeah,
Like
it was cool.
It's insane how thin they made that iPod Touch 4. Dude, I miss the iPod Nano. That was a good device.
The iPad Nano. Which one though?
I-
They kept changing the design for that so many times. It was crazy.
My favorite iPod Nano is the 6th generation one. The little square that you could clip.
This with the touchscreen.
Mm-hmm. That was my by far.
Yeah, that was super. I had one of those actually. That was a super nice one.
It was great for exercising. And the cool thing too is you could buy like a watch strap.
And then it annoyed me. The 7 was like worse.
Yeah, the 7 was like credit card size.
So much worse.
Yeah.
It was way bigger.
And-
I was like, why did they reverse course on this?
It was really frustrating because they released the 7th gen, which introduced Bluetooth. I don't think the 6th gen had Bluetooth. So they introduced Bluetooth in the 7th generation, but Bluetooth would have been a much better addition to the smaller form factor, because then you could literally have it on your wrist and have Bluetooth audio, like Bluetooth headphones. So it would have been like literally like an iPod Apple Watch pretty much back then.
Yeah, I remember you could get watch straps for it. It was cool.
I miss that. I still have mine. It still works.
Does it?
Yeah.
You have the 30-pin connector.
The 30-pin
cable?
correct. Yeah,
for it?
I got one. I mean, it's powered off, but last time I tried turning it on, it still worked and everything. It was a nice device.
What was the first phone that you got? Was it that iPhone?
No, it was a flip phone Nokia device. from Verizon.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What was the first smartphone?
iPhone 4.
iPhone 4?
Yeah.
Oh, you weren't an Android guy.
No, my first Android device was the Nexus 6P.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a long time
Yeah.
to wait to use Android.
Well, that was...
I think.
So I had the iPhone 4, and then I got the 5S, which was... So they released a 4, there was the 4S, 5, 5S. I think it was 3... I waited 3 or 4 years to upgrade from the iPhone 4 to the 5S. And then after the 5S, I waited to get the Nexus 6P. So it was like... I only had 2 phones before the 6P, pretty much.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then I was pretty much on Android exclusively since then. And now I'm kind of like tinkering again with the iOS ecosystem. So, as you know.
Mine's kind of opposite. The first iPhone that I got that I actually used as my main phone was the iPhone 10.
Wow.
Because it was... The iPhone 10, I think, was cooler than all the Android phones at the time.
So what'd you
I
use
don't think
before?
anyone else was doing, like, the bezel-less stuff. My first phones were crazy. my first Android phone ever was the Kyocera Rise. You should look up that phone.
Kia, what? Kia, like the car company? What?
Kyocera, Kyocera.
Kyocera what? Rise?
Kyocera Rise.
Oh. Interesting.
And then after that phone, I got a Galaxy S2. And that was a big upgrade. But it was they made 2 different Galaxy S2s. There was a Sprint specific edition of it, and that was the one that I got. I wonder if the Galaxy S2, the one that I have, even shows up if you look for it, if you look it up.
Let me look up Sprint. I think I see it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It is the first one. It had 4 illuminated buttons instead of like 1 central button.
Interesting. Yeah, I see it. Man, that was an ugly phone.
It was so fast. At least I thought at the time. It was way faster than the Kyocera Rise.
Kyocera Rise.
that S2 was like top of the line. And I had that for so long until I got the OnePlus One. And that was a really nice phone.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I was almost
going to
buy a Nexus 5 almost. But then the OnePlus One just came out and was like better than the Nexus 5 in every way, except it was gigantic, which I didn't know I didn't like at the time, but it turned out not a fan of big phones.
Well, at least you learned quickly. Most people don't.
Most people don't learn.
Most people just never learn, and they just keep buying big phones. Look, if you want a big phone, fine. Just don't have no small phone options, which is like currently the situation. There are no small phones you can buy anymore that are like from a mainstream like you can't go into a Verizon store and come out with a small phone unless it's like a flip phone. It's just not an option. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
And no, I don't consider the Zenfone 9 a small phone. Like, it's not.
How big is this Zenfone 9?
It's still bigger than a 13 mini.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, and that's considered like a small Android device.
Yeah, I thought it was like much smaller than that actually.
No, it's got like a 5.9-inch screen.
Oh yeah, that's way bigger than the 13 mini. The 13 mini is like the perfect phone, I think.
I agree. Imagine if they just released the 13 mini with USB-C.
With USB-C.
A little bit better battery. And like a dynamic island.
Though. That's the big problem. Dynamic island is nice. But like battery tech has not evolved at all since like for forever basically. It's like the improvements are just so tiny.
I wonder though.
And I think that's why people are getting away from the small phones because you can't improve battery life without
I fight back on that because
making it bigger.
The battery life, for all we know, I think that if we took battery technology today and put it inside an iPhone 4, it would last days. But like the technology is also like advancing as well, you know, like CPUs are able to do a lot more now.
Well, I mean, people expect their phones to do more.
Right. So I would take a 13 mini with just like a downclocked processor. Like I don't do anything on my phone. Just have it run Signal and like maps and like that's it, you know? Like, just do a few things well and have decent battery. Like, get rid of, I don't need 2 cameras on a phone. You know, I just don't. It's stupid. Like, now there's like 3 cameras on the back of a phone. Like, take out some of that garbage and increase the battery size a little bit. Or like, there's like a million things they could do without having to touch battery technology to make the battery a lot better. And I think this is like very well demonstrated when you move away from stock Android to a custom ROM. Like, I see a noticeable improvement in battery life because you don't have Google Play services just destroying your battery life 24/7. So
That's true.
I don't know.
But I think also Android is just more inefficient in general.
I agree.
I mean, we've seen that forever.
Right.
Where like Apple can get away with way smaller batteries.
I agree.
So there's probably a reason only Apple is making super small phones. But there are a lot of useless features. I mean, I don't need like my computer to show special effects when I'm recording a video if I do this, right?
Oh, there you go. Yours is on too.
I turned it on just for that, actually.
Wow, you did it for a bit.
For a bit. Now I have to turn it back off before I forget. I don't want it to do that. I'm holding out hope that the iPhone SE will be mini. But yeah, like you, I'm on the fence. I mean, I was telling you this. I'm kind of convinced by my thought that maybe they're getting rid of it because of the MagSafe accessories. Because like if they make accessories that go on the back of the phone, the biggest they can make it is for the smallest phone that they offer, right? So they seem to be going all in on that.
That's unfortunate, man. I better make
lots of bad
the
things.
13 mini I got last a long time. Well, that was kind of it for today. We just wanted to get ourselves caught up. There haven't been any like major highlight things that we can just like break down and talk about for a long time. So in the meantime, we're just kind of sending our thoughts along. I know that not everyone's a big fan of that, but some people also really love it. So for those of you who love it, I hope you enjoyed. For those who don't, well, hopefully not. I mean, it's kind of a good thing there's nothing like super noteworthy for us to talk about because it's probably bad.
Yeah, it's usually bad, yeah.
Right. So this is kind of where we're going with this. So thank you all for tuning in. If you like what we're doing or you want to engage with us a little bit more, definitely check out our forum, discuss.techlore.tech. It's pretty darn active over there. We have 2 sponsors who are sponsoring the forum now, which we're both super excited about. It's Ente and NotesNook. Ente's photo storage, and then NotesNook is like notes, obviously. It's kind of like Evernote, but end-to-end encrypted and all that jazz. So definitely check them out as well on our forum. And aside from that, we're on Patreon, patreon.com/Techlore. And is there anything else to plug?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time on Techlore Talks 14.